I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Metropolitan Planning Organization. We'll do a twofold event, confirm the attendance and also take action on the minutes of March 22nd.
I so move.
Could I have a second?
Second.
Any corrections or omissions on minutes of March 22nd? Not seeing anyone? Sylvia, do you want to wave your wands, please?
I will wave them on. All right, we'll go by communities. Auburn, we have Bill Herman online. Bill's finding the mute button.
I'm sorry, present, yes.
Thanks, Bill. Not a problem. So everybody, when you first come in, you're always muted. That is to avoid any problem. We have a surprise and interesting guest, so you just have to unmute yourself. All right, moving on. Bedford, we have Charlie Fairman,
Here and I.
Bill Jean,
Here and yes.
and virtually Barbara Salvatore.
Here and yes.
Thanks, Barbara. In Candia, we have Al Hall.
Yes, I'm present.
Thank you, Al. And online, Judy Cartier.
Here and abstain.
Thank you, Rudy. Chester in the house, Andrew Haddock
Here and abstain.
and Deb Munson.
Here and yes.
Deerfield here, Bob Cody.
Yes.
Thanks, Bob. And Derry online, John O'Connor.
Yes, in here.
Thanks, John. I don't think we have anyone from Francistown yet. I missed that. From Goffstown, Barbara Griffin.
I am here and abstain.
Thank you, Barbara. David Pierce.
Here. Yes.
Thanks, Dave. And Jacob LaFontaine.
Here and yes.
Thanks, Jacob. No one from Hooksett yet, I believe. From Londonderry, we have Suzanne Brunel.
Here and abstain.
Thanks, Suzanne.
Thank you.
Art Rugg,
I am here and yes on the minutes.
thank you.
You're welcome.
And Martin Strugus.
Here and yes.
Thanks, Martin. Manchester, we have Peter Capano
Here and yes.
and Ray Clement
Here and yes.
and Dan O'Neill.
Here and yes.
Thank you so much, Dan. In New Boston, we have David Litvinovich.
Here, I'll abstain.
Thanks, Dave. And in Wyndham, we have Peter Griffin,
Here and yes.
John Hiltz.
Here and abstain.
Thanks, John, and Edgar Lapointe.
Here and yes.
Thanks. Let's see, I didn't see anyone from DOT, but that's unusual. Did I miss you? No. But we do have, just to acknowledge non-voting members, we have Tim White from DES and Craig Tubbs.
Okay, Sylvia, thank you. Is there any old business?
No, but I'm going to take the old business spot to do Commissioner Appreciation Moment while you're all fresh and still eating and you're all present. So we have many new members that haven't even hit the first year mark and are still working on your first year, but we wanted to appreciate the following: for 5 to 10 years of service, Peter Griffin, Al Hall, John O'Connor, Barbara Salvatore, Andrew Haddock, Deb Munson, Jeff Moulton, Jennifer Vadney, Suzanne Brunel, and Mark Sunin. So now starts getting real fun. Over 10 years, Bill DeShotko, Deb Levins, Dan O'Neill, Ray Clement, Joanne Duffy, and Martin Strugus. So totally appreciating all that time. Over 20 years. All right. Who's on this list? Peter Capano, Art Rugg, and Fred McGarry. And then there are two that I want to acknowledge for the over 30 years of service to SNHPC. Bill Herman, big shout out to Bill, and to Barbara Griffin. Thank you so much for over 30 years of service. How about a round of applause? All right,
thank everyone for volunteering your time and expertise for this organization. It's really great.
We couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much.
Under new business, we're going to have an overview of the vehicle bike ped counting from Adam Hlasny.
All right. Just a moment here, folks.
No problem.
All right. Can everybody see this?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So good morning, everyone. I'm Adam Hlasny, Senior Transportation Planner here at the Commission. I'm going to give a quick overview of our traffic counting program as well as our bike ped counting program. So why are we out there counting cars? Well, there's a few reasons for that. Number one is the Highway Performance Monitoring System. So this is a national level information system that includes data on the extent, condition, performance, use, and operating characteristics of the nation's highways. So we're assigned these counts by New Hampshire DOT, and there are about 200 of these every year, which we integrate with our around 200 from our own travel demand model. So we do about 400 counts a year. We also take municipal requests. That often comes in the form of a DPW. Sometimes a police department wants us to do a speed study. We also count for developments of regional impact. So before and after a development to see how traffic patterns can change. There are three main types of counts we do. The main ones are volume counts. So if you go over a single tube stretched across a road, that's a volume count, just simply the total amount of vehicles going over that tube, regardless of direction. Directional counts are, as the picture shows here, two tubes. So capturing who's going east and who's going west or north-south as the road happens to be laid out. And then we have class and speed counts. So class counts, we classify, or the counter classifies vehicles into 13 classes, ranging from motorcycles all the way up to double tractor trailers. Speed counts are another type that we do. As I said, often municipal requests or local requests to have a speed study done. So on the left here, you see a map of our 2022 counts. We have about 1,200 total count sites, and they're on a 3-year cycle. So we do, like I said, about 400 a year. That's roughly half DOT and half for the SNHPC model. The field season began about 2 weeks ago. We start right after the snow melts and we go right into November. We do about roughly 20 counts each week. And we often get 17 or 18 of those that are successful. Usually a couple of them come up for various reasons. Street sweepers sometimes knock the tube out, so we have to redo some of them, but we generally get about 18 successes a week. And then ADT is the annual average daily traffic. That's the standard measurement of how many vehicles use a specific stretch of roadway in a given day. And that's how we measure, we can compare the ADT across any count in our region. So this is an example of a field sheet that we take out with us. I prepare these every week. We have a list of the locations, as you can see here. We put the AADT on the sheet, so the folks that are installing the counts have an idea of what to expect when they're out in the field. It's a safety issue, safety precaution, as well as when we download the data, we can see at a glance how close we are to past AADT. So if we're counting a road that 3 years ago had only 1,000 vehicles and we get 3,000 this year, chances are something went wrong with the count and we have to redo it. We typically try to get within 10 or 20% of the volume of the previous year. And then over here is a map of, I tend to print these out before each week of counting. And before we head out, make the most efficient route so the field team doesn't waste time looking for the best way to go between all the count locations. So we have a traffic count web map. If you go to our website, here's how you would find it. It's under transportation, traffic counts, and then there's the web map. And I believe this will take us there. So for those of you who haven't seen this before, this is all of the counts that we do in our region. They are color coded. The darker the red color here, the more volume. So I'll zoom in. And if you zoom in far enough, you can see the AEDT on each count. You can see 1,500 here, 6,900. And I will show you one example that I find kind of interesting. So down here on Brown Ave, we have data here that goes back all the way to 2000. And as you can see, in 2006, we had an AADT of 29,000 vehicles. After the airport access road, the Ray Wazorek Drive opened, you can see the volumes went way down to 17,000 in 2015. And then it started to rise again in 2018. The 2019 and 20 data are on their way. We don't have them up on the website just yet, but they're coming soon. But this is an example of how you can see how this captures trends from the past couple of decades. So moving on to bike ped counting. This is a little bit different of a program. While we've been doing traffic counts for over 2 decades, this program only began 5 years ago in 2017. When we purchased our first infrared counter. You can see in the picture down here, this is what the counter looks like. And this particular location is the Windham Rail Trail. So we have 2 of these that we move around the region. We do counts with a duration of 2 to 3 weeks, and we count year round. So even in the winter, we're out there moving these around. And the map here is where we've counted over the past 5 years. A total of 64 locations, 40 trails, and 24 sidewalks. And the trails are in blue here and the sidewalks are in orange. And why do we count? Capturing seasonal trends, interesting some of the trails I'll show you in a moment. The trends season to season can fluctuate quite a bit. Justify investments in the infrastructure or support grant applications, and to gauge event attendance. So for instance, we've counted at the Manchester Car Show on Elm Street before COVID, obviously, to see how many people were attending that event. So here's an example of our 1-page summary sheet that we have for each count. I realize this is a little bit small, but what I wanted to call attention to was the average hourly weekday and weekend profiles here on the right. So this particular location we just did, we picked this one up about 3 weeks ago. This is the Hands Across the Merrimack Bridge right here in Manchester. So on the upper right here, the average hourly weekday profile, the blue line is westbound and the orange line is eastbound. So as you can see, not a whole lot of activity early in the morning, but as the day goes on, around lunchtime, there's a spike. And then from about 4 to 6, 7 o'clock in the evening is when most people use that particular trail. On the weekend, it's a little bit different. Again, not many early morning users, but use picks up around noontime and it stays high until about 5 o'clock when it goes back down. So something to keep in mind here, these locations are very weather dependent. So if we counted this again in July, this would look totally different because people, March, April, people are starting to get out there, but it's not you don't have nearly as many folks using the trail at that point. And each trail count is a little bit different. So I encourage you to visit our website and you can see one-page summaries of the counts we've done. Another example I'll give here is on the Londonderry Rail Trail. I like this example because it shows the average hourly profile in the summer, which is the orange, and the winter, which is the blue. So as you can see, different from the Hands Across the Merrimack Bridge, there's a big spike at 9 o'clock in the morning in the summer and somewhat in the winter. It goes down midday and then it picks up again in the evening. Well, obviously the usage peaks about 42 users per hour in the summer, and it's only about 15 in the winter. I found it interesting that the patterns are virtually the same despite the different volumes.
And the pictures from Gulfstown, I recognize it.
It is.
That one tree.
We didn't have a Londonderry photo that I was happy with, so I just threw that one in there.
Nice.
So how do we prioritize our counts? Well, recently we had 5 staff members rate our existing sites on a 0 to 3 scale, where 0 is the least important relatively and 3 is the most important. We tallied those numbers up. So the top score was 15, and then we ranked them and put them into 3 tiers. The staff rated these on how much they were connected to other trails, the relative importance in the region, and past volumes. So this is our top trail location list. As I said, there are 3 tiers. We're going to count the top 10 annually, or preferably more than once a year, but at least annually. Tier 2 is biennially. And then tier 3, sometimes there's a one-off town request or something that we did that's not as popular a site. So that will just be as needed. So with that information, we made a counting schedule for 2022. And what we did was we looked at the previous count dates from 2017 to 2021, put them in and color coded them based on season. So we can see at a glance, we last counted, Elm Street at City Hall. We've done that many times in different seasons. Londonderry, we've done summer, winter. So basically we're trying to capture trends the same time of year if possible. It's also useful to get different seasons, as you saw in the Londonderry example. So we're trying to do comparisons year over year, as well as sample different seasons. So what's next for our program? Well, we have so many sites now that we're looking into purchasing some new counters. With 2 counters, it's really kind of difficult to get around the region and fulfill town requests. So there are more counters that should be on the way, hopefully in the next few months, which will really open things up for us. We're currently conducting a study of the 3 Manchester trails, the Piscataquag, the South Manchester, and the Rockingham Trail. We set those out last week. Each trail we're going to count for 2 weeks and just get a baseline of how many people are using them, because there are a lot of trail improvements coming down the pipe. We'll continue taking municipal input and requests. So if there's a location that you didn't see that you'd like to see counted, you can just let us know and we can do our best to get that into the rotation. And then the final thing here is a more user-friendly map. We do have a map on our website, which you can get those one-page summaries, but as of right now, they're only PDFs. So what we're trying to do is get a more interactive map that you can compare year over year at the same site with a couple of clicks of your mouse, rather than downloading individual PDFs. So that's kind of one of the next things on the horizon. And then the picture here is Cam and Tammy setting out the newer of our 2 counters, which is smaller than the original gray one, which allows it to be more versatile in where we set it. And that's all I had. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Go ahead. Hi, Adam. Ray Clement from Manchester. How's the vandalism with these items when you have them out there? Reported any?
That's a good question. We did have 1 counter stolen. It was about a year ago on the Derry Rail Trail. But we've been doing this for 5 years. We've set out hundreds of these, and that was one out of 100 or whatever. So we are always careful to tie it up well. We try to hide them, put them behind a tree or a post whenever possible to deter that. But it's always in the back of our minds.
Any additional questions from in-house here for Adam? Any questions from remote participants?
Dan had a question.
Dan, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Adam, on Rockingham Trail in Manchester and Piscataqua, are you capturing, at what point are you capturing the use of those trails? Because my experience, and I haven't used Rockingham that often, that has expanded now all the way to Mammoth Road. And on Piscataqua, you can get on at the ballpark and, you know, you can break off at different points along the way. So how are you capturing that?
Yep. So for Piscataqua, we have a counter near Main Street. That's the furthest east. And then we have one at the Douglas Street parking lot where there's the ball fields there. And then one near the Singer Bridge to Goffstown. For Rockingham, we have one, and I have a map I can send you after this too. Rockingham, we have one at Mammoth Road, or we will, and then we have two east of there. So we're trying to spread them out a little bit so to capture various points of people coming on, as you said.
And is there a reason you're not going as far as, or are you calling the Hands Across the Merrimack a separate trail?
We just counted there, so that's not part of this study per se, but we will be doing that one regularly.
But wouldn't that be considered part of the Piscataqua Trail?
Yeah, I guess it would be.
Okay, and then just curious, how expensive are the counters?
Well, the counters we currently have are between $3,000 and $4,000. The ones we're looking into now are significantly less expensive, but they don't have directional counting capabilities. So we're weighing our options and seeing whether that's a worthwhile purchase.
And what's the funding sources? Just the general operating fund, or are there specific grants that allow you to purchase the counters?
Nate, do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, the counters that we purchased so far, Dan, we purchased through our Unified Planning Work Program with New Hampshire DOT. So 90% of the cost is covered through our work program with DOT. 10% is SNHPC operating funds.
Thank you very much.
Adam, how often are these trails used at night?
It depends on the trail. The Manchester ones, you do see a few people, but I'd say the smaller towns, virtually nobody.
Okay.
The counters are going 24 hours a day.
No, I understand that. I was just curious if they had any idea from people they've spoken to in the various communities, if they see that there's how they're used at night. So anyway, any other questions for Adam?
We have Alfred raised his hand. Alfred Eister.
Alfred, please go right ahead.
Hi, I'm just wondering, is this counting stuff, is this offered to any of the small surrounding towns for their own use to, you know, in figuring out budgets for roads and signaling and other things? Or
do you mean the bike ped counting or the traffic counting?
Mostly the traffic counting, but both actually. I was just wondering.
Yeah, we did do a town requested count for Francistown last year. I don't remember the exact location, but Jamie Pike requested it. We did that.
Sorry, I lost you for the last 5 seconds. So
I just said we did do a town request for Francistown, and we make an effort to incorporate town requests as quickly as we can.
Okay, so is there like budget? Does that cost the town anything or not?
There's no cost to the community.
Okay.
So if you're just asking, I mean, we often get requests, for example, one year Wyndham wanted speed counts because there was a lot of speeding in one area, and then the police know when they can show up because of the count tells you when the speeders are coming. So that's, the police department typically loves that. Another town maybe wants the counts because of a development of regional impact. There's so many different reasons. So what we do is we look at the location of where the community wants the request to make sure we can get a viable count. For example, last year, Derry wanted a count in front of parking lots, but that we couldn't do it because people aren't going fast enough, and you don't know how they're going to quite turn in. But so most of the time we can get that request completed, and there is typically no cost to the community. So Alfred, if you're thinking of something for Francistown, just talk to our team and we'll be more than happy to work with you. And I don't know if you heard Adam say, but Jamie Pike worked with Adam and his crew last year, and they got that count done.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to know if it's,
Yeah,
if the town has a problem area, if they could get something done, but it sounds like it's already happening. So.
We have 3 more requests for questions. Jeff, go ahead.
I was just wondering, how close do people have to be to the counter in order to get counted? I mean, if it's a really wide trail, do you have to put something close by in order to count people, or?
Yeah, the counters have a 15-foot guaranteed range, but we've found that they pick up folks 20, 25 feet away. So we typically look for a tree or a post that's right near the trail, so we seldom run into that issue.
Okay.
Al?
Thanks.
Relative to the front page of Union Leader this morning, the couple in Concord that disappeared and murdered apparently, but I'm just curious, do you, hopefully you provide this account information to the local police authorities?
Yep, it's public information, so anyone
No, I know,
who
but
wants.
I know it's public information, but like anything else, you have to take the initiative and email, for example, to the police department, make aware of monthly or however.
For example, in Gulfstown, since I'm involved with their rail trail, yes, I do that. I take the annual results and I send them to the park department, who supposed to manage the trail, and also to the police department.
Oh, good. Thank you.
You had a question.
Yeah, developers, what counts do developers use in traffic studies? Do they do their own counts? Do they use our counts? And I know they must do their own, but do we incorporate their counts at all? Do we have any way of getting their data and incorporate them into your overall studies?
Not to the best of my knowledge. I have received calls from folks like that before, and I've directed them to our website and or sent them specific count data more than what's on the website if they need that.
Typically, like, for example, and Carl, feel free to chime in on this. For example, there's been for at least 2+ years, a development between Chester and Candia. And so they'll have for that development, because it was considered a development of regional impact, the development team for their application was required to submit a traffic study. So that's done by their own team, and then we review it. But we did provide, working with the town of Candia, because there were a lot of questions about the speed and the road. We did do a speed count around November, as I recall, and that was working with the town to verify some of the concerns. And indeed, those concerns were verified about the speed. It was surprising how quick cars were going. What, any thoughts on that, Carl?
My comment really, excuse me, just going on a little bit here, is that, the developers do a tremendous amount of traffic counting for their speed, for their traffic reports, traffic plans and so on that they must submit to us. And why aren't we trying to get their data to incorporate into our overall study of traffic? It seems like we're missing an opportunity to get a lot of data. They have perhaps more data than you have now, maybe somewhat localized to particular developments. But in Bedford, we have a lot of them going on.
I can only offer perhaps one reason is not on a repetitive cycle. It's just a one-time shot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Carl?
I was
Okay,
just
I
on that.
understand. And some of our developments have been going on 5 years, so, and they've done many of them.
Just on
Go
that
ahead.
point, it would be nice if there was a process to, that if we know who most of the people, the firms are out there taking counts, and they're doing them for mostly private enterprise. And in my previous position and previous position, we tried to get this idea cooking to, as the VHBs and as the various firms out there collect their traffic counts. It'd be nice to have like a clearinghouse, a central place to submit them to. But there's no stick. There's a little bit of incentive, a little bit of carrot, because they could use that data. But I think, as Charlie said, there were, somebody said they're one-offs, and that they, they're usually specific to a couple of intersections at a certain time. And if you don't have those places counted on a regular schedule, then they become pretty meaningless pretty quickly. Although, at least you could look and say, hey, in 2017, there were this many counts or turning movements at this intersection. As far as what Sylvia had brought up about what we do with certain developments, it's similar. It's on demand. We do our large cast, our large net of the network on a 3-year basis, rotating basis, and beyond that, if it's specific locations, then it's depending on things, for us at least, development of regional impact or specific requests from one of your communities. So we can't count everywhere. We can. It's tough enough to count in 400 locations.
Kyle, thank you. I just think it would be interesting. We do these studies, and on the planning board, we look at them in a lot of detail and on their predictions, but we never see their predictions correct. So if they put in like the market and main development in Bedford, we've had a lot of studies done on a lot of traffic studies. We rejected one because of the traffic. And it would be, I think, the developers only do counts before and predict the future. And we never get to see the future. But if you had the data on before in the files, and then we did a study afterwards, we'd then be able to compare how accurate. We just have no idea how accurate the developers and those people are in predicting. That's the point. And I know we've got time for some stuff.
Yeah, just 10 seconds. I mean, on that one, we could, maybe it's a matter of flagging where, keeping a running list of where there's developments of a certain, magnitude, and then going back and looking at our not permanent counters, but at our counting locations, again, because they generally get counted every 3 years. And just like that instance that Adam showed you, there probably was some prediction about what the new connection to the turnpike would do for Brown Ave, and just a matter of digging that out. Somebody spending the time to dig out the old numbers and comparing them to what we have. But it's just time, money, and structuring a program around it.
Okay, thank you all, Adam, Kyle, for your input on this. I'll close discussion on this and we'll move on to other business. Is there any other business? Not seeing any?
Move to adjourn the MPO.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call to order a Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. We'll do what we did with the MPO. We'll take actions on the minutes of March 22nd.
Move to approve.
Is there a second? Any corrections or omissions? Sylvia, do you want to do a head count and the
Sure.
approval of the minutes? Or
Sure.
not approval?
Yeah, we have Bill Herman in Auburn,
Present, yes.
Bedford, Charlie Fairman,
President, yes.
Bill Jean,
Present, yes.
and Barbara Salvatore.
Present, yes.
Candia, we have Al Hall
Yes.
and Rudy Cartier,
Abstain.
Chester, Andrew Haddock,
President, yeah, abstain.
Deb Munson,
President, yes.
Deerfield, we have Bob Cody,
Present, yes.
Derry, we have John O'Connor.
Present, yes.
I believe from Francistown, Alfred Eisenberg joined us.
Present and yes.
Thank you, Alfred. Goffstown, Barbara Griffin.
Yep.
Oh, she just left. Okay, thank you. Saw that. And David Pierce
Yes.
and Jacob LaFontaine.
Present and yes.
Let's see, Londonderry, we have Suzanne Brunel,
Present and abstain.
Arthur Rugg,
I am present and yes on the minutes.
Martin Srugus,
Here and yes.
Manchester, we have Peter Capano,
Present and yes.
Ray Clement,
Here and yes.
Dan O'Neill.
Here and yes.
New Boston, we have David Lubinovich,
Here, I'll abstain.
Wyndham, Peter Griffin,
Here and yes.
John Hiltz, and Edgar LaPointe.
Yeah, present, yes.
All right, John Hiltz, are you there? Just muted maybe?
Sorry, Sylvia, can you hear me?
I see it unmuted, but I'm not hearing you. But if you do a thumbs up on your icon, we'll know you're haven't been abducted by aliens or something.
Oh, there he is.
There you are. You thumbs up. Thank you. Okay.
Okay,
So if the group could let me know that you can see this PowerPoint.
Yes.
Thank you. I'll put it in. So we have a special guest today. Come on up, Fred. Fred McNeill. We're very lucky from the engineering department. And Fred, I think because we've lost some time, I'm not going to do a big intro, but I welcome you to let everyone know who you are and what we're talking about.
Good afternoon. My name's Fred McNeill. I'm Chief Engineer of the City of Manchester's Environmental Protection Division. And I'm a longtime supporter of Southern New Hampshire planning. I was on the Sustainability Committee here for probably 10 years. I see a lot of old friends here. And then also on the video, in fact, an old Vanpoof friend, Art Rudd from 25 years ago. So it's great to see a lot of old faces. I was asked to come here to share about Manchester's CSO program and to inform you, enlighten you, and hopefully entertain you a little bit. And I'll try to do all three.
You have a thing that will move the camera. So what you want, because there's so many different things here, your best bet is just to use the arrow keys.
Okay,
All righty.
but then I am not facing my audience here.
You'll do a twist and shout. I'm sure you'll work.
Can I go this way? No, okay.
so
Yeah, that
So-
shows the camera.
Fred, you're here to make sewage sexy.
Well, trick. Actually, it's not only sewage, it's about a lot of things, so. I'm gonna start with a little background and then talk about infrastructure, and that's a big thing that Pete and I have worked with for decades. And then our CSO program, the history of it, and some conclusions, and I'd be happy to take any questions. So I mentioned I'm the chief engineer of City of Manchester's Environmental Protection Division. That's really the city's wastewater utility. We were created in 1975 and we're Division of Public Works. And we're an enterprise. So an enterprise means we don't take any tax dollars. What we do is we're financed from our sewer user rates. We have a beautiful campus at the banks of the Merrimack, 15 acres, 10 buildings, staff of 44, admin, ops, maintenance. We're all down there along the beautiful banks of the Merrimack. Now I'm gonna talk a little about infrastructure and what we own, operate, and maintain that really services all of southern New Hampshire. We have a wastewater treatment plant. It was built in 1975. You can see we did various upgrades, increasing the capacity each time. But we serve 4 communities: Bedford, Goffstown, Londonderry, Manchester, and you can see what percentage they have. We serve a metro population of 172,000 people. And we've been investing in that plant ever since I've been there. In fact, we put about $75 million over the past 15 years. And this is really the front line of environmental stewardship. Over 500,000 people take their drinking water out of the Merrimack River downstream from us. If we don't do our job, that's the Flint, Michigan all over again. And so again, we're very proud of the staff and the work that we do down there each and every day. That's manned 24/7, 365 days a year.
Hey, Fred, maybe you should very quickly talk about the use of your effluent as cooling water.
Oh, I could talk about that, since you like that, I'll go back to that. And so we're really a water reclamation facility. Peter mentioned about reuse, but I stated the most important reuse. We put all our water back in the river, and 500,000 people take that water out and use it for drinking water. That's a great accomplishment. What Peter has mentioned is we actually have a secondary use, in that there's a power plant in Londonderry, a gas-fired power plant that takes, again, the measurement we use, they see up above is MGD, million gallons a day. But they take 5 MGD from us to use for cooling water. And to put that in perspective, that 5 MGD is bigger than 98% of the treatment plants in northern New England. So it's a very large volume of water. And the best thing about it is we double dip on it. So we sell them that water, and about 75% evaporates, 25% comes back in the sewer system, and we charge them again. So it's a win-win situation. And so, again, we have to get all the wastewater to the treatment plant. So we have 390 miles of sewer. The technical term we use for that is a shitload of pipe, and that is a lot. A big thing about it is over 100 miles of it is over 100 years old. And we'll talk about that old infrastructure that we have. But I'm very proud to say we have a robust, we call CBOM program. It's a maintenance program for the sewer. We invest about $3.5 million a year in maintaining that system. And that's a sustainable program. We're in year 12 of it. And again, take great pride in sustainability, because that's very important in our business culture, in our industry. So we have a very robust maintenance program. We also have to get the flows to the plant. So we have a bunch of pump stations. We have 12 of them out there, from little tiny stations to huge stations. Old stations from the mid-70s to recent ones, all part of our infrastructure. And then we also take care of stormwater or drainage for the city. So that's yet another 190 miles of pipe, 14,000 catch basins, 3,000 drain manholes. Again, a ton of infrastructure for us to own, operate, and maintain. But similar to the CMONs, we're a robust, we call it MS4, but a maintenance program ongoing for the stormwater. And we're mimicking the success we've had at CMONs. And again, I'm very proud when I open my email, I see all the folders, and we're on year 5 for MS4. So again, sustainable maintenance programs. We also have several urban ponds and towns and waterways. And believe it or not, through the MS4, we are now regulating the water quality in these ponds. So we have Crystal Lake, Dawes Pond, Pine Island Pond, Stevens Pond. Stevens Pond is my favorite. If you know where Stevens Pond is, it's right where 93 and 101 meet, and there's a pond underneath. All that waste from the road discharges into that pond, but they want us responsible for water quality. So again, a huge challenge there. Impairments, chlorides, that's salt. Where's all the salt in Stevens Pond come from? 93 that goes over it. Phosphorus, dissolved up oxygen. So a lot of challenges. So when I talk about infrastructure, let me put in perspective. In the city of Manchester, we have over 1,000 miles of of buried pipe. That's from here to Boston 10 times. Manchester Water Works has 500 miles of water main. Public Works, 190 miles of drainage. EPD, 390 miles of sewer, 1,000 miles. 250 miles of that is over 100 years old, aging and failing infrastructure. That equipment has reached the end of its useful life. Do you have any appliance at home that's lasted 100 years? I think not. And again, this is buried in some pretty harsh environment. So look,
Fred, that doesn't even count the gas mains that are under the city streets.
that's
the,
correct.
The conduits carrying telephone conversations and data and.
All important infrastructure, private infrastructure for all the utilities, but you are equally as important. And you hear all about aging and failing infrastructure with bridges and roads. Well, let me show you what our aging and failing infrastructure looks like. It looks like a road collapsing like that. 1923 cast iron main in 2014. That's the overhead view. I like the up close and personal view. That looks like a war, does it not? So again, that's a failed water main. Millions of gallons came gushing out of that, very high pressure. Not only to take out the road, as Peter mentioned, every utility in that road we had to replace. Gas, sewer, drainage. This was Kennard Road near McIntyre ski area. Poor guy's going down plowing, all of a sudden bang, he goes in the sinkhole. Again, a failed water main. It took 2 heavy-duty tow trucks to drag that baby out because it was full of sand. Imagine how hard it is. And it's in the middle of winter, you're freezing cold. Nothing easy. This is Route 93 in Concord. Can you imagine that? No, we actually have pipes under the Merrimack, and we're working now with DOT to rehab one this spring because we want to prevent this. I mean, you had to shut down 93 North. What kind of catastrophe is that? And as Peter knows, Murphy's Law, when does that pipe break? Memorial Day weekend or something, right? What kind of catastrophe would we have Memorial Day weekend if we had to shut down 93 North? This is my favorite from Manchester. Imagine being the poor guy in the red car waking up in the morning going out saying, what happened there? Water main break in 2010. So that's infrastructure and aging and failing infrastructure. One thing you take away from here, that's one of our themes. The other themes, the state of the state. What I kind of did was merge a couple of presentations again to enlighten, inform, and entertain. The biggest things our industry face, aging and failing infrastructure. Increased regulatory requirement. Everything we do at EPD is regulatory required. And we'll talk about that in the CSO work. That MS4, I said all the phosphorus and everything in the ponds, federally regulated. CMOM, a federally regulated program. So everything we do is federally regulated, federally mandated through more regulations. And let me get on that soapbox a bit. We've all heard about PFAS and everything. They're measuring that in parts per trillion. Can you believe that? Think of a sandbox in parts per trillion. So our science has advanced so much, we can detect things parts per billion. What people don't realize is how costly it is to clean this up. People hear PFAS is bad for you, causes cancer. We want zero. What they don't understand, zero is going to cost you billions and billions of dollars. Climate change. Need I say more? We see that each and every day here. I've been at EPD for 16 years and I've seen not one, not two, but 3 100-year storms. I think those are supposed to happen once every 100 years. I don't know what's happened, but again, I've seen 3 in my time. And unfortunately, I see a little more. And the last thing that's facing it, as you can tell from a lack of hair and gray, aging and retiring workforce. We can't, like everyone else, we can't get anyone in this industry. It's so important because again, as I told you, 500,000 people take their drinking water downstream for us. Water is the basic thing for health. Again, believe it or not, you can live without internet. You can live without electricity, but you cannot live without clean water. So the state of the state. Now I'll get into a little bit about our CSO program. What is a CSO? Well, what happened, the standard design for all of America back in the day, and when I say back in the day, from the 1800s to about World War II, they would put one pipe in the ground. And that pipe would serve both sewer and drainage. But what happens is when a storm happens, the capacity of that pipe is exceeded. So when that happens, when that pipe capacity is exceeded, all they did was put a pipe out to the river. And they did that everywhere in America, standard design practice. You know, again, there was no consideration of water quality, environmental stewardship in those days. And so the city of Manchester is faced with this, like a lot of other communities in the country. Over here, I get a little too animated here. You see, I get excited about this work. You asked me to make sewer sexy. I'm trying to do the best I can.
Doing a good job.
So this is what a CSO really looks like. That's a pipe right down in the milliard, discharging to the right, sending a combined of wastewater and stormwater. But let me tell you something, when this pollutes, it's really what we call the first flush. Because what happens when that first comes out, it contains all the sewage and drainage. All the water comes out after that, 95, 98, 99% is stormwater, clean water. And the Merrimack River, believe it or not, can assimilate that type of pollution. We'll talk about that a little later. Well, that's what a CSO really looks like. So our CSO history, Manchester's, 1994, they passed the Federal Clean Water Act, CSO control policy. Now, all these cities up and down the East Coast that were developed in the 1800s all had to deal with this, and all mega projects. Like anyone, we did a bunch of engineering studies in the mid-90s, and then 1999, we signed a federal consent order. So again, this is a legal agreement with the Department of Justice, Environmental Protection Agency, in the city, that we would clean up these CSOs. Two-phase program. First 10 years, right over here, we were up and down the street on the west side of the Merrimack. After that, we're gonna do the east side. So phase one was on the west side, 1999 to 2009. We had a nice office right down on Kelly Street. I remember Pete at many of those meetings there. Yes, with our friends Rich Davis and the guys. So in 10 years, we spent $58 million on this program. We separated 15 drainage basins, 8 construction contracts. We rehabbed and replaced 53 miles of pipe. Again, think of that. It's from here all the way to Boston. Again, a ton of pipe. So what we really do is build a new drainage system, and the existing system was used for a sewer. So a massive 10-year, $58 million program. And it was wildly successful. We reduced CSO discharge to the Merrimack River by 99%. We were only ordered by the court to, again, this is an engineering measurement, level of control. We're supposed to get a 3-month level of control. We got a 2-year level of control, meaning that our CSO should only discharge once every 2 years. Again, wildly successful, improving Merrimack River water quality. And most importantly, you hear from me all the time, done on schedule and on budget. With the amount of projects we do, that's critical. But not only do we have nuts and bolts there, the concrete benefits, we end up with 26 miles of road all through here reconstructed. 9 miles of new water, 14 miles of gas, 8 miles of curbing, 6 miles of sidewalk. Again, so we're not talking small amounts. Just to walk 6 miles of sidewalks is a long walk, right? That's gonna take you a couple hours. A lot of sidewalks, all handicap pedestrian ramps. So great concrete benefits. But you know, we focused on more than that. Social benefits. We just don't want improved water quality. Like a lot of places, environmental justice is the new buzzword. You look at anything coming out from EPA, it's got environmental justice in that. But before that word was invented, I called it urban revitalization. We went into these inner city areas here and improved them, used green infrastructure, ADA compliant, a positive impact on the local economy. So all social benefits, in addition to those concrete nuts and bolts that I shared with you. So now we're done with west side. It's time for phase two, go to the east side. And I remember this, I was all pumped up. Peter remembers it probably. We finished the west side. We're gonna go kick ass on the east side. Let's go, let's go. We went into EPA with a two-phase program. Phase two is gonna be 165 million. Phase three, 220 million. Again, follows successful themes, infrastructure upgrades, urban revitalization, social justice. But you know what? EPA, as they often do, didn't do anything. When I say didn't do anything, we spent almost $2 million on this big plan and this big report. And they didn't approve it, they didn't review it, they didn't do anything. We could not move forward without their concurrence. Again, we weren't gonna make that type of investment. So we really had minimal interaction with EPA over the next 6 years. But we knew we had a long road in front of us. We knew we were gonna have to complete this work no matter what. So we moved forward with 3 contracts that we knew was gonna happen. We did Chestnut Street project, the North Chestnut Street project, and then a project at the wastewater treatment plant. And I don't know if you remember Chestnut Street, we actually started on Valley and went down Willow, then hopped on Chestnut and went all the way to Bridge Street. That took 5 years. Again, indicative of our projects and our culture, very slow moving, but again, a successful project. So contract 1 was Chestnut Street 2.
Fred, could you take the mouse and admit that person up top? You see that little?
Yeah, do we really want to admit them or?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure. All
Yeah,
right, you're all set.
thank you. That's
Doing
generous.
from Valley to Merrimack Street, again, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, close to 2 miles of various pipe, all down Chestnut Street. And this was big pipe. So again, 72-inch OD, that's over 6 feet. The technical term we use is big ass pipe. That's what this is. We're 24 feet deep, right in front of the horizon. So again, that took a tremendous amount of coordination. I mentioned you can't close 93 on Memorial Day weekend. Verizon had all their events. We worked very closely with them, make sure traffic got in and out. But when you have a hole 24 feet deep, that's a big hole. And you're putting pipe 6 feet in diameter in. Again, all big stuff. Here's another picture of it. This is actually contract 2. And that's where we went from Merrimack Street all the way up to Bridge Street. Again, 3 years, $10 million. Again, I'm getting a headache, 15,000 feet, 17,000 feet of blue pipe. So again, that's 3 miles of various pipe within that project. And again, we leveraged this project like we did all of them. We talked about bike lanes they did earlier. The first bike lanes in the city were done under this project. And we leverage all this projects to build on that. If you see the bike lanes on Mammoth Road that start at 293 overpass and go all the way to Londonderry, that was an EPD project. If you see the bike lanes on Wellington Road that go all the way to exit 1, those were all done on an EPD project. Again, we try to leverage our dollars, and bike lanes are a great example. But again, complete infrastructure upgrade, new water, gas, fiber optics, decorative crosswalks. You go in front of the Palace Theater, those nice fake red bricks crosswalks? We did those. Again, when we put something back together, we want to leverage those. Even here on the west side, behind Wolf Park, I was so proud. When I was a kid, there used to be horseshoe pits back there. I went back there, we revitalized it when we went through there with a pipeline. So again, we try to do the best we can for the city. We did a big project at the treatment plant. Again, I say regulatory driven. This is to remove phosphorus. This is part 2. It's costing us $45 million to remove phosphorus for us to discharge into the Merrimack River. And again, for those of you who don't know, phosphorus is a nutrient that promotes algae growth. I haven't seen any algae in the Merrimack River, and I've lived here a long time. And we'll talk about the financial viability of some of these regulatory requirements. But either way, we have Pittsburgh Construction. I was at the monthly progress meeting today at the plant, 3-year project, $22.5 million, trying to keep that on schedule and on budget. So phase two negotiations, just going through 10-year time frame. We submitted the long-term control plan in March of 2010, and it's September 28, 2020. So 10 and a half years later, we finally have a signed consent decree. Again, that's how slowly these wheels move at times. But as I said, we were proactive at the beginning of it. So we got a few contracts done. But finally, 2 years ago, we had a concrete program. So now that phase two that we said is gonna be 160 million, 10 years later, look at that number, a lot more than 160 million. And I'll get into why that number is so big. Well, the reason it's so big is the first number under it, the 191 million. And that's for a big tunnel we're gonna build that I'll get into in a minute. But again, 190 million, we're sinking the cemetery brook, 80 million sewer separation, 30 million Christian Brook, 25 to wrap up that phosphorus project, 6 million in assessments. So again, adds up at 338 million. That is a mega project, one of the biggest projects the city's ever undertaken in its history, period. So now we're in year 2 of this, and where are we? Well, I'm knee deep in paperwork. If you go to my office, I got reports and drawings and contracts everywhere. So that proves there's a lot of work going on. Cemetery Brook Tunnel. We just literally submitting the EPA, the basis of design report as I speak. And I'll share with you, because that's really the crown jewel project of the CSO program. The phosphorus removal I mentioned, ongoing at the plant with PC Construction talking. System optimization. So it's just a tiny $3 million project that's going to require us to dig a 25-foot hole between Fisher Cat Stadium and the Merrimack River. So again, just another simple project we got to do there. All kinds of other things. As I mentioned, the crown jewel is really Cemetery Brook. I had started at Stevens Pond talking. So let me go. Cemetery Brook is the largest drainage basin in the city. Covers 4,500 acres. It creates the most CSO discharges around. And so Stevens Pond is where Cemetery Brook starts. And that's a natural drainage basin for the city. It goes right down the 17th hole at Dairyfield, goes under East Side Plaza, that goes under Mammoth Road, and is underground through the rest of the city.
Yeah, Fred, let me highlight it right from there. Downstream from Mammoth Road is the Elliott Hospital. The Elliott Hospital has a parking garage off of Mazzabisic Street.
Yeah.
That parking garage actually straddles Cemetery Brook. It's in the ground underneath the ground level parking. And it is super high. If you ever are in that, next time, think about it. It's super high so that an excavator, a construction crew can go in that parking garage and dig down to Cemetery Brook, at least that few hundred feet that is straddled by the parking garage.
So that's a level of detail we go into, and as Peter mentioned, so we work with the developer on that specific height, so we could go in and work on that. And again, we want to be accommodating. Do we want to say no to an expansion at Elliott Hospital? No way, right? We want to work with these guys.
Do that.
And actually, the new Hilton True Hotel downtown off of Commercial Street, exact same thing. They're over the edge of our CSO regulator. And again, we work with these people. We don't want to inhibit the development of the city. We want to promote it. So again, Cemetery Brook. So 200 years ago, you had Stevens Pond up there, you had a nice stream. So everyone just threw all the garbage, all the human waste and everything into a little stream that went to the Merrimack River, and it all disappeared. They said that was fine. So then they built the wastewater treatment plant, and they went to that stream that went to the Merrimack River, just put a 90-degree bend on it. Now everything comes to the treatment plant, including all of Stevens Pond. So we are treating all the water in Stevens Pond. And so we treat about 5 million gallons a day in clean water. Again, that's more than most of the treatment plants in northern New England.
No one gives you any money to do that.
No. And that costs us millions and millions of dollars that we're wasting because we're cleaning clean water. So again, a two-pronged thing. We're improving water quality in Merrimack River by removing CSOs, but we're also removing dry weather flow from the plant. So I won't get into the details, but because this is such a big project, the easiest thing for us to do is build a tunnel. So we're building a tunnel. So what's the tunnel look like? Well, it's gonna start just south of the Queen City Bridge and go underground for almost 2 miles. It's gonna pop up just east of Mammoth Road, next to the old CVS, which is across the street from the new CVS. So that's 2 miles. And now let me put things in better perspective. So that tunnel is gonna be 12-foot diameter. So that's even bigger than this ceiling. It's gonna be 30 to 80 feet deep. So again, that's an 8-story building. That's gonna be a big, deep tunnel. It's gonna take us a year just to build the machine to drill the tunnel. So we are gonna get a tunnel boring machine. It's gonna go in right across from the railroad tracks next to the Merrimack River, the Queen City Bridge, and it's gonna start tunneling. 12-foot diameter. When they get a mile up here, everything still has to come out here. When we're working up here, 1.75 miles, you gotta go 1.75 miles to go to work on the tunnel boring machine. When you're 1.7 miles, all of this material still has to come backwards all the way here, because that's the only way out. So again, a huge construction project. For those of you that remember all the old canals that used to be next to the mills, those were built to divert the water to power the mills. This project is on the same size and scope as a project like that, a mega project. So this, well, 6 drop shafts, 30 to 80 feet deep. And just to put things in perspective, some of these drop shafts are gonna be 20 feet in diameter. So that's from here to that wall, 80 feet deep. Again, when I use the term big ass, that's another big ass hole. Here's a picture of it, you know, and here we go, way down deep. Let me see if I can look. So the bottom is at 230, and if I go all the way up there, it's 293. So this one's 63 feet deep. That's an example of what one of the drop shafts will look like. Because not only do we have to let water into this, we have to let air out of it so you have capacity for water. So again, a huge engineering project. Christian Brook, a little more manageable, just a couple of contracts, $30 million. We're separated 25-acre basin. And so this part is going to go right in front of a good friend of mine's house, Mr. Capano, and we'll talk about that after. But for those
from my kitchen window.
Yes, for those of you that are familiar with the area, we're going to be on North Street, and we'll go from North Street eastbound from Walnut, where Peter lives, all the way up to McIntyre Ski Area ultimately. That's a 2-year project, and they're actually going to be out there working this tomorrow. And they'll be, for Peter's benefit, Advance will be out there doing probes, again, to determine the exact level of rock beneath the surface. And the contractors are gonna start there Monday, May 16th on 2 fronts. So then there'll be another active construction project for us.
Are you paying to move Peter out of his house during this work?
Well, I am gonna change my email address so he can't email me every day. I'll start that. And so we have 2 contracts, the main drain, again, as I mentioned, McIntyre down Smith Road to North Street, the north all the way down to Walnut. Then we come back afterwards and we have to do all the pipes coming off of this main drain. So again, that's another 2 years. And then we'll come back and do final paving in 2017. So again, that's 5 years out for us to do these projects. It will be in this area. Again, when I talk about our industry and our culture, things move slowly. Most projects have this late, well, they're longer, because what you don't see is there's a study done first, then a design. So we're 2 years into this project already. Then we got 5 years of construction ahead of us. So again, a 7-year lifespan for this project. And then, believe it or not, we have a phase 3 somewhere down the road. As much as I'd like to stay around to watch it, I don't think I'll be around in 2040. And if you remember, I started the story in 1995. And so again, we're 27 years into the story, and we still have a long ways to go. But believe it or not, we have an engineering report that, you know, identifies 5 CSO basins, 4 outfalls, 200 million. But again, I don't know what it's gonna be in 2040. So who is paying for all of this? Well, I'm a Manchester resident now, so I know I'm gonna be paying for some of it. So now I'm gonna just talk a little about rates, because I had this slide. We've been excellent with rates in Manchester. I've been with the city for 15 years, and we raised rates twice. When I first came on board, we were way behind, we're actually in the red. And so we did some significant rate increases all the way through 2010. That was in preparation to start the CSO project. We're all ready to go. I told you, we're ready and raring to go. And then it was limbo years for EPA. So under Mayor Gadsden, he was excellent. He said, Freddie, we're not starting that program, we're gonna give some money back. He said, fine, and we gave a 7% rate decrease. Has Infinity ever given you a rate decrease? At public service? I'm just saying our utility rocks. It is an example of it. So we were back 10 years later, no rate increases for 10 years, and we implemented 5 rate increases of 4%. And you can't read below there. Let me go back. But what I'm proud of, it says our average rate is 439, and the state average is, well, I can't see it, it's about over $700. So still, Manchester's rates extremely competitive, almost half of what the state's rates are.
That's for a typical family home.
Yes, yeah, residential, yeah. And it's actually based, so if you go on Department of Environmental Services website, they have all the rates for every community. And it's based on the same amount of water volume in units. So it's apples to apples. And you know what happened? What bumped it up, just to digress? I mentioned nutrients. The whole seacoast had to treat for nutrients. And so again, they invested about $300 million. The crown jewel there was Portsmouth, but Dover, Hampton, Newmarket, again, all dealing for nitrogen is a nutrient they had to deal with to protect Great Bay. Well, how about federal money? That'd be nice to get. Well, when I was here in phase 1, in the early mid-2000s, we still had earmarks where, you know, our congressional delegation could put a ride on a bill and say, give the city of Manchester $500,000 for the CSO program. And we did that successfully. But then I believe it was the first Bush phased those out. And then the Lemel years, we got nothing. So now we're starting this huge phase 2. And I've been in this business over 40 years. I've never seen so much money coming into the industry, and that's super. So as you know, we got Biden's big infrastructure bill. We got ARPA money. We still have earmarks. I actually had an interview with Congressman Pappas's office yesterday, and there were several people on that call, again, for earmarks that they're giving out. I think they were officially called community something requests. And actually just put in an earmark with Senator Shaheen's office. So we're trying to leverage some federal money as best we can. And then our colleagues at the state have been excellent. And again, they've really been partners in all this work and even financially. And I can give them a call up every time and they put Manchester priority. If you look at their priority list, the city of Manchester CSO programs are number 1, number 2, number 3 as the most critical in the state. So again, we've had tremendous support from our colleagues and friends at DES. So some conclusions. Again, this is all about water quality. So we're federally mandated to discontinue our CSO discharges to improve the water quality of Merrimack River. But as you know, we're leveraging that, urban revitalization. So we go through and it's a whole infrastructure upgrade. New sewer, new drainage, new water, new gas. New roads, we build those roads, we build them from scratch. You know, look at Pete just to confirm, a nod of the head, new base and everything. ADA compliant, green infrastructure. So this past infrastructure has served us almost for 100 years. And that's what we're hoping this new one will serve us, especially all the subsurface infrastructure. Positive impact to local economy. And we mentioned the term environmental justice, and it is. It's Manchester's inner cities, basements that get flooded out doing storm events and everything. And so again, when we go through there, we try to do the best we can with beautification, plantings, anything. Now I get my soapbox one more time. Is conclusion. So we're investing 300 million CSO mitigation. Our discharges in 2020 were 154 million gallons. The Merrimack River's flows was over 1 trillion gallons. So what we discharge, the raw sewage, is 1/100th of 1%. A very, very small thing. And what they're concerned about is recreational activity on the river and people that health could be impacted. But when it's pouring rain out, how many people are really out in the Merrimack River recreating? Maybe a few diehard fishermen, but I don't think the canoeists are out there. I don't think the people out there swimming or anything. All the downstream wastewater treatment plants have the technology to treat for CSOs. They've been doing it for decades. They were built that way. So again, is this a cost-effective measure to address water quality? Again, so we contribute 1/100th of 1% doing wet weather times. And the simulated capacity of Merrimack River, again, can take most of that. So again, but you know what? It's kept me professionally employed, professionally challenged for my entire career. And we laugh about it. I say it's a regulatory driven industry. It really is. And so there's a whole community of construction contractors, equipment vendors, engineers, and municipalities like us who EPA have kept fat, dumb, and happy for a whole professional career.
But Fred, you've been at this long enough to see the transition from rivers being a dumping ground to rivers being a natural resource.
So now you let me hit a home run with the next one.
Oh.
So that's what it used to look like. And you are right. And so what we're celebrating this year is the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act. So the Clean Water Act was actually an amendment to legislation in 1972. And this is one of the greatest engineering achievements ever in America. I put up there with NASA putting a man on the moon. I put it up there with Eisenhower in the interstate highway system. You were right, 50 years ago, our waters were filthy like that. If any of you remember the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland, it caught fire in the late 60s. Randy Newman
It was
did
the
a great
first year
song.
of color photography.
Randy Newman actually did a great song on it. So America came together, they recognized it. How many of you remember the Indian commercial of the tear coming down because they were polluted? Okay, so it's really social consciousness. They had just rallied it, stopped the Vietnam War, and the next thing was the environment. And they looked around and they saw rivers like this. So the Clean Water Act provided money, the most important thing, to build wastewater treatment facilities all over America, because that was the biggest reason. And they provided 90 cents on the dollar. And then the state provided 5 cents on the dollar. So when the city of Manchester built their facility, that I sit in the office now, was 95 cents on the dollar between the state and the feds. The city paid 5 cents. And you know what? That thing was gold plated when they built it, and rightfully so, because it's lasted 46 years now. And again, I look at the quality they put in, and I'm a big believer in make the investment now. We tell our engineers all the time, this infrastructure is going to be here for 50 years or 100 years. Spend the money now. And that's what they did at that plant. And so in 50 years, our rivers went like from here to here. I grew up around here. I used to fish right downstream of where our plant is now. And I catch the biggest bass with orange eyes, and you couldn't eat them. You go north to Amoskeag Falls now, it's full of recreation. There's more Tarzan swings on the banks than you've ever seen. There's swimming, there's boating, there's fishing, there's jet skiing, there's everything on the Merrimack. So we've been extremely successful through the Clean Water Act.
Are you ready for questions?
Wait,
Oh,
yes.
okay. See, Zach, do you want to kick off with the first question?
Sure. My question would be actually two questions. One, has the, I guess your department or the city as a whole thought about developing a stormwater utility and stormwater fee similar to, like, I know Dover and Concord are both looking at right now. And the second question would be, with all these work we're doing on some of these brooks that that were buried and turned into pipes at one point, was there any discussion of daylighting them?
So the first one, yes, we have looked at a stormwater utility. The city of Manchester is the one that created enabling legislation in the state of New Hampshire to have stormwater utilities. And actually, Mayor Gatzis was a state senator then and helped us with 2 bills. So we were on the forefront of that. And then Senator Gatzis became Mayor Gatzis and said, Freddie, it's not time for a new fee for our residents. And so it was not implemented, and it's still sitting on the shelf. And actually, I talked to our engineer as early as 2 weeks ago, saying, make sure that's ready to dust off whenever the opportunity presents itself. But Dover, if you remember, had problems. They actually tried to implement it once already, and it was voted down. And so again, a lot of other people in the state are watching that. But again, for people that don't know, stormwater utilities are very common, especially places outside of water-rich New England. And you go down to the southwest, the northwest, there's several of them. And again, I mentioned MS4, we have to do all of the stormwater work, but you have no money for it. And so again, what a stormwater utility does is charge everyone that owns a parcel of land a certain amount. So now you have sustainable funding to address stormwater needs.
Additional questions from the remote?
Oh, I don't think I answered his second question, which was about daylighting those.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
And no, most of those, so again, when we do a CSO project, it's called a separation. And so again, that existing Cemetery Brook line is still going to be used for wastewater. We are building a new drainage system. And so generally daylighting does not come into play doing CSO separation activities.
Okay.
Fred, if you do hit the stop share, we'll be able to see the gallery and see if there are questions. Thank you.
Stop.
Additional questions from the remote?
Red.
Left to the
Yeah.
left.
Red. There you go. All right.
Yes, Dan.
Thank you. As you can tell, we're very, very lucky to have Fred working for the city of Manchester. I enjoyed a long working relationship with him, and I just want to publicly in front of this group say thank you, Fred.
Well, thank you, Dan. It's been a pleasure working with you and look forward to continuing that relationship.
John O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my question. Is your system 100% aerobic, or you have a blend of anaerobic and aerobic, and what do you do with the methane?
Well, neither. So again, you're getting to some technical talk that, again, I don't know our full audience will appreciate, but we actually incinerate our biosolids. So we have no gas that we do. We have the only incinerator in northern New England. And you talk about regulations, I want to get into that. But no, we do not do that. So we incinerate our biosolids or our sludge. So we do not have digesters, which is used to reduce that volume and creates that methane gas. There's a few digesters in the state. Nashua has an egg digester. And if you go up to Franklin, with the Winnipesaukee River Basin program that serves Lake Winnipesaukee, they have a type of digesters. But it's not commonly practiced here.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question along the same lines. What do you do with the phosphorus and stuff that you pull out of the water? Does that get recycled in any way? Is that you burn that stuff up or what?
So we are biologically removing our phosphorus. And so again, that was a big strategy that I promoted, because there's 2 ways you can do it. You can precipitate it with chemicals, or you can do it biologically. Biologically is more expensive and more complex, but in the long run, it's more sustainable. Because again, the chemicals that are used to precipitate out are extremely corrosive, and then you have chemicals used all the time. So again, ours is a biological process, and so the bugs eat it up.
It ends up in the sludge.
Yeah,
Which
well,
you burn.
yeah, which we burn, yes.
Additional questions in-house here?
Behind you?
Oh,
James.
yes.
James Mayo with Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. It's really interesting about the route for the first part of phase 2. I think that was Cemetery Brook Tunnel. Is
Yeah.
That will be quite deep. So imagine in a lot of places you probably won't have a lot of surface disturbance. Because the tunnel machine will just be boring horizontally at pretty deep levels.
You are correct. However, we have to come back and connect everything to that tunnel. So what I did not get into, but was up there, we have what I think 6 contracts totaling about $80 million in what we call separation. So they're gonna come back along the entire tunnel alignment, and they're gonna dig up every street and lay a new drainage system in there. And so go from larger diameter pipe near the tunnel, and as it branches out, it gets a smaller and smaller diameter. So there'll be significant construction after the tunnel.
I see.
And one thing I did not mention, if I could just go in the tunnel, what I did mention along the route is we follow basically under Queen City Ave up till we get to the 5 corners of Willow and Queen City and that craziness. And then we jump on the old rail trail, which the city has rights of. We follow underneath the rail trail almost all the way to Mammoth Road.
Go ahead, James.
So I've heard some talk of it in the past, but I didn't know how much of it is really being baked into what's happening with these improvements. But discussion about after that large tunnel comes through, and it sounds like there's smaller drainage mains that will be above that tunnel on that rail bed. After all that infrastructure is done, that there's going to be the potential to sort of budget to extend the Rockingham Rail Trail.
Oh, that's all in it. It's been in it since day one. When I talk about leveraging this, 10 years ago, when we submitted a plan to EPA, I had an engineer drop a nice little bike path on top of it with a bench and some plantings and everything. And no, yes, that the bike trail over that rail trail is still in the project, most definitely.
Okay, go ahead, Dave. Then I have some
Fred,
questions.
how do you assess the capacity of the construction firms in this region to take on all your projects?
Good question. So a few things. The tunnel boring one will be a national contractor. And so again, and the funniest thing is we went before the mayor board of aldermen about a month ago, and I got a phone call literally the next day from a tunneling contractor in St. Louis. He said, Fred, I heard you're building a tunnel. We're tunnelists. And I never heard of the guy. And I looked him up on the website, they're a worldwide tunneling contractor. It's so funny, it's literally the next day. So they have, search webs or whatever, I'm sure every meeting agenda for every major city in America, if tunnel pops up, they do. So for the tunnel, it'll be a national contractor. Local contractors, we're pressing some of their capacity. So the one we're starting in front of Peter's house, we were very fortunate. We got one of the largest pipe contractors in all of New England, PGOso and Sons out of Hyde Park, Massachusetts. And so I would say that we draw New England for a lot of the pipe contracts. The tunnel will be national. And then the smaller separation contracts, we've had a lot of great partners. Park Construction out of Fitzwilliam, New Hampshire has done a lot of work. The late great R.D. Edmonds did a lot of work. So the smaller contractors, they'll get a chance.
Rudy, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I do, Fred. How did you handle the downtown Elm Street sewer project? Is that still a CSO or is that just sewerage at this point?
That's still combined and that's phase 3. So if you want to come back in 2040, we can discuss that one, my friend.
We'll see. Thanks.
Fred, I have a couple of questions. Do you anticipate the addition of any other communities to your system which would affect capacity?
Would it affect capacity? No. We've have had discussions with both Auburn and Hooksett over the years to hook on to our outer ends, and that hasn't happened. But we are what we consider a mature plant. When I say mature, Manchester's built up. We are not going to add too much additional flows to the plant. Both Bedford and Londonderry are running under their Bedford and Goffstown are running under their allotment. Londonderry is the only one with some challenges, and actually with the Pappas thing yesterday, Londonderry was on looking for money for a pump station to pump their flows from the new Woodmont development off exit 4A up to our plant, because the dairy plant does it. And I'm gonna just digress for one moment there. So if some of you were on yesterday with Congressman Pappas, there had to be 50 projects. I was very happy to hear probably about 10% of them were environmental infrastructure related, including, sending flows from exit 4A up to here.
How do you compare with, say, Concord, Low Lawrence, Haverhill, the other cities on the Merrimack, in separating the sewage water from stormwater?
Well, Concord, kudos to our friends up there, had the foresight to separate it back in the 1970s and 80s. So they are generally separated. Nashua is still working on separating. Lawrence, Lowland, Haverhill are all CSO communities, and they're all moving along. And when I say we're federally regulated, all of those communities I just mentioned have consent decrees with EPA and Department of Justice mandating their work. And so I'm not quite sure of the pace of it all. Nashua is almost there. Manchester has been the largest contributor, if you look at those 5 communities, of CSO discharge. But all the cities at various stages of mitigating.
Any additional questions for Fred? Yes, Nate.
I know we're at a bewitching hour, but just one quick question.
Yes,
on
I know.
Stevens Pond. You mentioned Stevens Pond and the salt issues. How do you deal with something like that? I mean, it's very obviously you can't really take salt out of the water. But we've always been told that the strategy is really one for green snow programs and teaching people how to salt the roads correctly and be more sensitive in terms of salt runoff into waters like that. But you said, when Stevens Pond water with those chloride loads are coming in, is anything, from your end moving the needle on chlorides, or is it really on the salt application end that really will move the needle?
Well, as you can probably tell, I do bust DOT's chops whenever I can over it. And then the serious answer is DOT is on the MS4 stormwater permit also for their assets. Their assets 93. So they do have requirements. But again, I can remember when they built that in the 70s, and all they did is they put downspouts from those bridges right down to Stevens Pond. If you go there now to boat, literally, you see a sediment buildup under the downspout. That was common practice when that was built in the mid-70s. There's no easy answer, and let me get my soapbox a little bit there. So Stevens Pond not only is 93, but that watershed covers Hooksett and Auburn, all coming to that also. So again, they could be, contributing to that also. And when MS4, that permit came out governing stormwater, I don't know if you remember, we actually had litigation going, and there was a band of Southern New Hampshire communities bringing these issues up to EPA. One was the biggest thing is that even though there's a boundary of a community, that's not a watershed boundary. And a lot of communities have water bodies that 2, 3, and 4 communities that watershed drains into. So there's no easy answer to that. We just try to be good neighbors with everyone, with DOT and neighboring communities.
Nate, you had the last question. So Fred, thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
To adjourn, Mr. Chairman?
Oh, not yet, not yet. Is
I waited.
okay, well, no, is there we have public comments? Any public comments? Any insights from the commissioners? Not seeing any? Okay, Peter, you want to take it away?
to adjourn.
Is there a second? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
Everybody. See how we do?